Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have another Let's Make 8, and this one is part 1 of a part 2 series, and this one features the My Monthly Hero Kit for October 2018. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside this kit. This kit is still available as of filming right now, so I will link to that down below. But let's take a look at what's inside the kit. So it always comes with some ribbon that is tied around the outside of the stamp set. And sometimes it's one piece, sometimes it's two. This time it was one piece. Last month it was two. And there's just some really cute, very intricate images in this stamp set. I love that big tree. I'm going to do quite a bit with that one. And then it comes with the dies. So that stamp set is a 6x8 clear stamp set. It comes with the tree paper layering fancy die along with the rest of the coordinating dies. And I like to keep the packaging, so I just use my anti-static powder tool on that to make the stickiness go away. So let's take a look at what's on the inside, or what comes with the rest of the kit. It has this iridescent watercolor ink, and I will say that mine was actually clogged, so I had to do a little surgery on it and get it to not be clogged anymore, probably because it was sitting on its side through packaging. But it's fine. I'll just leave that sitting upright like that, and it should be good to go. You just have to really shake it up to get the iridescent to move around within the liquid. So let's take a look at how that iridescence looks. It's very shiny, very pretty. It also comes with the iridescent stars, and they're actually not that thick, so I don't mind putting those on my paper. Aren't those pretty? I'll use those a few times. And it also comes with glitter paper. It comes with two each of these colors in the blue, and it doesn't rub off, I've noticed. The blue, the silver, and that green color. Super pretty. So let's get started with card number 1. This one is actually a fairly long card. There was a lot into it. So I am going to do some Distress Oxide ink smushing. I've done this a zillion times before on my channel, but I'm using Evergreen Bough Bundled Sage, and I'm taking some of that iridescent watercolor and I'm putting that in there as well, just to see how that reacts with the Distress Oxides. I have some 140-pound watercolor paper from Strathmore, and I'm just smushing my paper into that, and I'm going to heat set that and do that several times. I'm going to keep doing it until I get the coverage that I want. In fact, I'll keep drying and doing that. I'll even clean it off and start all over again, just because I want to make sure that I have a good amount of color all over my paper. So just continuing with that process. It's a lot of fun and very addictive, as a matter of fact. I must have done it I don't know how many times. But I just keep going. I love the look it gives. It always gives a different effect, and I love how the colors react to each other. Sometimes they sit on top of each other. Sometimes they blend. It's always really pretty, and you can see the iridescence in that just from the light. I think I will continue to add that iridescent watercolor when I do this to other ink smushing ideas, because it was fun and I really love the look. So now I've put that inside my stamp platform, and I'm going to ink that up using that Evergreen Bough ink, because I want to just stamp it fairly subtly. I want that tree to I don't want it to stand out too much. I thought about doing black, but then I thought that would stand out too much. I want the tree to be fairly subtle. And since that paper's long enough, I'm going to go ahead and do 2 of them. And I won't use both in this particular video, but you will see it in part 2. I do use that tree eventually in part 2 of this 2-part video series. And then I will make sure to heat set that, because that ink is, it stays wet a little bit. And while I have my stamp platform out, I will stamp out the image that I plan to use using some Express It cardstock and some Memento Tuxedo black ink, because I plan to Copic color this image. I'm not going to show you the Copic coloring, because if I had this video, or at least this card itself, probably would have been about 15 minutes with all the things I did. So I've colored that, and it was fairly simple coloring. And I'm going to run this through my die machine, my little Sizzix Sidekick. I'm going to run this through my Sizzix Sidekick using some micropore tape. I even checked to see later on, because I love this Sizzix Sidekick so much. I checked to see if my tree would fit through there, and it wouldn't. So I did have to use my Big Shot for that one. But my Sizzix Sidekick is the one I reach for all the time if I can get away with it. And then I will also cut out that tree. So I'll also now make my base, which is going to end up being what I do my ink blending on as well. So I scored that at 5.5 inches to make that a top folding A2 size card. And now I've got some tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink that I am using a mini ink blending tool just to ink blend that around the outside upper edge of my card panel or my card base. I didn't want my card to be too bulky, but I do want there to be some pretty variation on the background. So now I'm using some Stormy Sky Distress Oxide ink, and I will blend that all over the outside. This is just some Neenah cardstock, by the way. And then I'll blend that till it's smooth, and that'll finish that ink blending. I'll clean up my mess, and then I'll get started trying to position my tree. I did use some Prismacolor pencils just to draw the background. I didn't, like I said, didn't want this card to be too bulky. I do end up using some foam tape to adhere my tree and my other image, but I wanted the background to just be flat. And I'm using another Prismacolor pencil to color the stem of my tree, or yeah, you know what I mean. And I'm using that same Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp my sentiment on the front of my card. And then I'm going to gold emboss the star that would go on top of the tree. I used a Copic, I didn't write it down, I believe it was Y35, but I just used, or YR21 is what it was. And then I covered that with some white, or some gold embossing powder, heat set that, and now I'm actually going to do some trimming on this tree using some, what am I using? It's the American Crafts Zing Rogue embossing powder. It's a very pretty red, very bright, Christmassy red. And I will do that all over the background until I'm happy with how I've covered it, just using Versamark ink and that Zing Rogue embossing powder, and then I heat set that as well. And now I'm ready to start adhering everything to the front of my card base, and I'm going to use foam tape for that, along with foam tape on the star, and then I'll even use that on my little images that are decorating the tree. And when I'm done with that, that'll finish off the first card in this series. Seems simple, at least in my head it did, but boy, it took a while. Card number 2 isn't actually a card at all. It's actually going to be an ornament, or you could use it as a tag as well. But I made it into a shaker ornament. So I've got some circle nestabilities from Spellbinders, and I have grabbed 2 of, not the absolute biggest that I have, but 2 that would line up, and I'm using some micropore tape to tape those together because I want to make a border, basically. That's going to be the outside of my shaker. And I will save that piece of glitter cardstock for something later. But now I'm just going to stamp my images. I'm not going to show you the coloring of these either. These are what's going to go inside. And I'm using that same Express It cardstock that I tend to always use, along with my Memento Tuxedo black ink. And I'll stamp that a couple times and then color those. And there isn't a die for the ice, so I'll just tape that down. But I will use the coordinating dies for the 2 little characters. And I'll run that through my Sizzix Sidekick. And it cuts them beautifully. And then I'll start assembling. But I also use one of those circle nestabilities to cut a background and some acetate. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the outside of that acetate. I'd actually never done this before. So I was thinking, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, and I'm using my anti-static powder tool along with my mini Misty to make sure that I stamp it right. And I'm using some white craft pigment ink, basically. And I'm going to stamp that a couple times to make sure that's there, good and crisp. And then I'm going to cover that with my ultrafine white embossing powder that I have. And then I'm going to heat set that. Now this is not heat resistant acetate. So this is where I was nervous. So I made sure my heat tool is very hot. And then I just used it in small sections. So I may want to invest in some actual heat resistant acetate, but it worked out fine. So now I'm using my multi-medium matte adhesive to adhere my outside to my acetate, and then I'm going to set that off to the side to dry, and I'll start setting up my inside. Now I've taped down that ice, which you're not going to see. it ends up disappearing. Like, it was completely pointless. I wanted to make this look like an ice skating scene, and it doesn't look like that. It won't look like that. So I will use that same liquid adhesive that I used to adhere my outside for my shaker, and then I'm going to adhere the little characters on the inside. And I'll also use that same adhesive to tack down some clear sequins to make it look like it's snowing out there. And I'll use my crystal katana to pick those up and adhere that to that liquid adhesive. That multimedia mat works really well, and it comes in that small tube. I need to get more of it, and it it dries clear. So I'm trying to decide on my shaker elements, and now I'm also going to double back my foam tape. And if you take off both of the release papers, you can manipulate that foam tape much easier. And so I've doubled that up, and so I'm using my embossing buddy to make sure the powder doesn't stick too much to the acetate, and I've poured way too much of that. It's actually embossing powder. It's a defective embossing powder that I bought, but instead of throwing it out, I decided to use it for shakers. Yeah, it looks like they're in a blizzard, like they are standing in a mile-high pile of snow. But at this point, it was too late, so that is that. I actually think it looks kind of cute. It just looks like they're standing in a snowbank. And for my tie, I'm actually going to use some ribbon that came in the previous month's kit. I didn't use it all last time, so I'm going to trim that down, and I'm going to use that for the top of my ornament. And I just have some score tape, and then I will adhere I'm off screen. I will adhere my ribbon to that, and then I'm going to cut out another one of those circles using the circle nestabilities, and then I will use some tacky glue to tack down the back so that that back looks a little bit prettier and you don't see where I've put the ribbon. And then that will end up finishing off this little project. So they're in a blizzard, but I think it's cute. I'll hang it on the tree. Card number 3 is a clean and simple card, and to start out I have some Express It cardstock in my stamp platform, and I'm going to stamp out just a few of the images using my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And I colored those off screen because they're so simple to color, and now I'm just lining up their dies with the micropore tape, and I'm going to tape those down and run those eventually through my Sizzix Sidekick. So I just thought these were really cute images, very simple images. I plan to use just a white card base, like I said, very, very simple. And that micropore tape does a good job of holding down the dies without tearing the paper. So that's why I keep sticking with that. Washi tape does a pretty good job too, but sometimes you can get washi tapes that don't work as well. So I've run those through my Sizzix Sidekick, all 3. And then I'm going to get my card base ready, which is a piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches that I scored at 5.5 inches to make it a top folding A2 size card. And that's just a Neenah card base. And I'm using that circle that I had cut out from the last project that I made. That was the leftover circle, the glitter paper. And with that glitter paper, I just didn't want to waste any of it. So I am going to use that on this card. And I'm going to grab a scrap piece of white cardstock after I colored some ground. So I don't want those images to just look like they're totally floating, so I just have a Copic. It's the C3 Copic. And I'm just going to color that to make it have a little bit darker ground. And then I'll use that, some scrap cardstock that's still some Neenah cardstock, and I'll stamp my sentiment on that using that same Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I'll trim that down, and then I'm going to start arranging my card. So I will adhere that with my Tombow tape runner, lining that up on my grid mat. And I'm okay with everything sticking off the side because I'll eventually trim that down. So once I have my circle where I'd like it, I'll adhere that, and then I will flip that over and trim down the excess. And then I will start looking at adhering my actual images. And for these, because it's the glitter cardstock, I plan to use some tacky glue because I want to make sure that stays very well. I just thought that would be a cute little winter scene from a city. You've got your little park bench and your bird getting ready to land. And that'll finish off this card. Pretty simple, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Card number 4 is actually probably my favorite because it's a motion card. These images mostly screamed motion to me, and so I just had to make a spinner card. So that's what we're going to make today. So I've got some circle nestabilities out, and I'm actually going to stamp my images using my stamp platform and the same Express It cardstock that I've been using along with my Memento Tuxedo black ink, because I will Copic color these, and those two things are very Copic friendly. And I'm not going to show you the coloring because it's very simple coloring, and I colored the images both the same because with a spinner card you want your images to be similar. So I'm using one of the little ice skaters, and I'll just stamp her out a couple times, and then I'll color her, and then I will cut her out using that matching die that comes in the set. So once I get that matching die all lined up, I'll grab out my Sizzix Sidekick, and I'll run that through a couple times. And I'm also going to run one of the circle nestabilities through using the glitter paper. I'm going to do that 2 times, and you will see why. So now I want to get my card base all lined up. So I have a piece of Nina Classic Crest cardstock that measured 4 1/4 by 11 inches that I scored at 5 1/2 inches to make a top folding A2 size card. And I am actually using some patterned paper from the Doodlebug Milk Cookies paper pad. This is one of the more subdued patterns in that set. It's a really cute paper pad, but this one I figured I needed something a little bit more subdued. So I am lining up my bigger circle nestability over the top of both. It's over the top of my pattern paper and my card base because I want those lined up. And so I'm using micropore tape to line everything up, and then I'll run that through my Big Shot machine. And then I'll carefully peel off that micropore tape and save the circles that I cut out for something else. And that should have cut through both the pattern paper and my card base as well, because I want that to be see-through. So now I'll start aligning all of my elements. So I'm going to use my circles, those glitter circles, and I will glue down my images onto each of those using some tacky tape or tacky glue. I want it to be a good strong adhesive because I don't know, how my tape adhesive would work over the top of this glitter paper. And so those are both very similar. They look pretty much the same. And then I'm going to grab out some string. So I'm just using some white string, and I'm going to double it up. I want it to be the length of my card front. And I'll trim that down. And I don't care that it goes over the length of my card front. I can trim that down later. And I will use some score tape on the top and all along those edges where I want my string to go across. And I didn't line it up straight and perfect. I know that. It's bothering me now, but I didn't. And then I'm going to use that same score tape over the top. I don't want this string to come loose, so I'm using a very strong adhesive to make sure that that string isn't going anywhere. And then I'll just use tape runner along the sides. I'll peel off the backing paper, and then I will put my patterned paper over the top. Once I get that all lined up, and pardon my head here, I want to make sure that it gets lined up perfectly. And then I'll trim off that excess string that you can see. And I'm also using a little adhesive remover to get adhesive that I didn't want. And here's where I'll start lining up my images. And once again, using very strong adhesive, this is the score tape. Get her all lined up, trying to make sure that she is upright. So I try and flip her and then make sure that I have her upright. And then I'm going to set the string over the top of her. And then I'll peel off the backing paper of the other one of her. And then I will set, using a little bit of tape runner also, just to make sure that I'm not going to have any issues with her coming apart. And then look at that. Look at how she spins. How fun is that card? Oh, I love it. I can think of nieces or any little girl that might enjoy getting that card. And then I'll take some extra of that patterned paper that I had, and I'll adhere that to the inside just to decorate the inside a little bit. And then I'll start thinking about my sentiment. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto some Nina cardstock using some Memento Tuxedo black ink. I'll just cut or stamp that along the bottom, and then I'll trim that down, and that one ends up being, I don't know, probably about 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/4 inches, and then I'll tape that down with my tape runner. And then I will want to do a little bit of embellishment. So I'm going to use some silver pearl liquid pearls to embellish the rest of the card. And I have these inside my alcohol ink storage tin, which is awesome for these. So I put all my stickles in there. It fits perfectly, and all of my liquid pearls. And I'll just squeeze some of those out. And I'll have all these things listed down below if you're interested in any of them. But didn't that turn out fun? Oh, what fun. That's probably my favorite card. I love all the movement. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the first 4 cards that I made in this Let's Make 8 series. This is part 1 of part 2. And I would love to know which one of these cards was your favorite. I always like that. That's probably my favorite part of making these, is learning which ones you guys like the best. And if you liked this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends if you want to. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, because I do have part 2 coming. And as always, I do appreciate you guys stopping by.